welcome you watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. On the show, our big focus tonight is on cybersecurity and why it is increasingly under threat around the globe. Are Indian companies the biggest targets of cyber attacks globally? That seems to be the case if a new report is to be believed. The Threat Intelligence Report 2023, released by Check Point, an American-Israeli software company, has revealed a sharp increase in cyber attacks targeting organizations worldwide, with Indian institutions suffering a disproportionately high number of attacks. The report highlights an alarming rise in cyber threats and emphasizes the urgent need for enhanced cybersecurity measures. The second quarter of 2023 witnessed an 8% surge in global cyber attacks on a weekly basis. The report says while the disruptive impact of the Russian-Ukraine conflict on the cyber landscape has relatively reduced in recent months, the threat landscape has returned to the state of normality. This new normal is characterized by an increase in cyber attacks. And here's how challenging the situation is for Indian companies. In the last 6 months, a single Indian organization endured an average of 2,146 cyber attacks per week. This number significantly surpasses the global average of 1,239 attacks per organization. The sectors that suffered the most attacks in India are healthcare, education and research, government, in particular the military, and insurance. In fact, the education and research sector faced the highest number of attacks per week globally. A clear pointer to the urgent need for robust cybersecurity measures and sustained vigilance within the industry. What makes this challenge far more daunting, though, is the misuse of artificial intelligence. Cybercriminals are exploiting the advancements in AI technology, particularly in generative AI chat platforms like ChatGPT. By leveraging these platforms, cybercriminals can expand the boundaries of their nefarious activities, posing an even greater threat to organizations. Sample this. In the second quarter of 2023, 1 of every 44 organizations globally experienced a ransomware attack. That's a 9% jump compared to the same period in 2022. The APAC and Europe regions witnessed a major year-on-year increase in ransomware attacks per organization, with a 29% and 21% rise respectively. On Global Lens tonight, we're asking, why are Indian companies the biggest targets for cyber criminals? What is it about Indian firms that makes them more vulnerable than others? Just how dangerous is this increasing trend, and what risks do companies face? And what should the Indian government and organizations, both in the public and private sectors, do to address this growing challenge? All right, to understand the complexity of this issue and to try and find some answers, we're joined by a panel of experts. I have with me Jiten Jain, cybersecurity expert and director at Digital Lab Voyager InfoSec; Kanish Gaur, technology and policy expert and founder of India Future Foundation; and joining us also is Saurabh Sanghvi, director and COO, Al-Sisar Impact Private Limited. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Jiten Jain, let me start with you. Now, perhaps to even term this report alarming would be an understatement. We are referring to the Threat Intelligence Report 2023 that's been released by by Check Point, an American-Israeli software company. I'm sure you're aware of the findings of this report. The question simply is, why do you think that cyber attacks globally have seen such a major spike in recent times? And why are Indian companies most vulnerable? Because that is what this report seems to clearly indicate.
Look, Neha, just to put things in perspective, no doubt, Checkpoint is a very reputed company, and especially their, reports on threat intelligence and cyber attacks are, of highest repute. But when they talk about the attacks, I think sometimes these antivirus companies or threat intelligence companies mean that even somebody scanning your network to find a potential vulnerability or a potential you being a target of hack itself is counted as an attack. A normal scan of your IP address is also counted as an attack. So I think if you take that into consideration, then this number of 13,000 attacks and everything, is a little inflated. But anyways, coming to the major point, yes, it is true that Indian, startups, Indian companies, Indian government sector enterprises have been increasingly becoming a target of hostile cyber attacks, and this is primarily because of three reasons. One, as you rightly pointed out, in last 7 years, India has gone into a very rapid digitalization process of our economy. We have invested heavily in our digital public infrastructure. We have tried to, put all our public services, all our fintech services on digital platforms. And the way we have invested in the services under Digital India program, we have not been able to pay the same attention and focus to the cyber hygiene and cyber education. So, that is one of the reasons that the speed at which we are digitalizing our completely infrastructure or digital infrastructure, we have not been able to protect it at the same pace. And second, you also have to see that we live in a hostile neighborhood. We are facing enormous challenge from China for cyber espionage. We are facing enormous challenge from Pakistan, both for cyber espionage as well as cyber sabotage. I think we have seen reports after reports of how Pakistan has been deploying ransomware attacks, malware attacks, and sometimes targeting our critical infrastructure in India, both for military gains and strategic objectives. And third, we also have to see that sometimes our sector is not much compliant with the standard operating procedures because we do not have a data protection law. We do not have a data personal privacy law. We are yet to see the Digital India Act or the Data Protection Act, which has yet to be passed by the Parliament. So a lack of a very stringent law, increasing attack surface because of the rapid scale of digitalization of our economic services and fintech sector. And third, living in a hostile neighborhood where both China, which is a dominant cyber superpower, facing threats from them because we are in a military conflict with them, and then a perpetual information war with Pakistan, where they have not only deployed cyber espionage or attacks as a state tool or as a as a tool of statecraft, they're also using information warfare to target India's political sector, create political rifts and religious divides in Indian society. They are using information warfare to target our, new unicorns. I mean, take for example, edtech sector. We have seen Unacademy and Beijus being targeted as companies which are going to become bankrupt, painting them into a poor financial picture. All this has happening from the Pakistan-sponsored troll. We have seen how China and Pakistan have been targeting our health sector. You see the COVID attacks, the COVID data, alleged leak, what we heard about, or the attack on AIMS, where allegedly a Chinese hacker asked for, I think $400 million or ransom or something. So let's not go into the figure or debatable issues. The point is that, yes, we are facing persistent, continuous attack. We are at a perpetual war with Pakistan, and we are in a complete state of cyber war with China. And if you look at this in context, I think we are going to have a humongous challenge because best of our manpower is living for the Western enterprises. So we do not have the manpower, we do not have skilled resources. Our institutions are not strong, and we do not have a strong law. So I think that is why we are becoming an increasing target of this hostile cyber attacks.
That is very comprehensively explained, and Jiten, it does look like India is facing a multi-pronged cyber war. And this is no laughing matter because this is really something that poses a very serious danger to India at multiple levels. You talked in great detail about how India lives in a hostile neighborhood, whether it is Pakistan or cyber superpower China. There are challenges galore for India to deal with. Kanish Gaur, do you agree with Jitin Jain's assessment? He says primarily the growing digitalization that India has seen in the last few years has perhaps led to this sharp spike in cyber attacks on the Indian government and Indian organizations in general, coupled with the fact that we have hostile neighbors on both sides in Pakistan and China that are continuously engaged in sabotage or espionage or information warfare with India. And then, of course, we cannot ignore the fact that, whether it is our laws or our, infrastructure, they have lagged behind in many ways. What is your assessment of why Indian companies are such soft targets for cyber criminals?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, and some excellent points raised by Jiten there. We also must understand that India is rapidly getting digitized. The number of startups that have turned unicorns, the new startup ecosystem has rapidly increased post COVID. And we see a lot of tech based businesses which are growing. And for some of these businesses, cybersecurity is an afterthought. Once they are hit by a cyber attack, been compromised by a ransomware, been asked to pay a bounty through bitcoins, it is then they realize that they need to take cybersecurity more seriously. A lot of time, these companies reach out to people like me and Jitin once they are compromised and they have been hit very hard. It is at that point of time they start thinking about cybersecurity. Most of the cybersecurity work has to happen well in advance. It is primarily that the Indian mindset where something will bad will not happen to me or I don't need insurance. Similar is the case that has happened in cybersecurity. The interesting part is that cybersecurity is today getting weaponized by use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Everyone is using generative AI. You could generate exploits. You don't need people to write exploits. You could generate exploits and weaponize this. And it is not just activists alone. There are multiple parties who are interested in this. There are countries who are running their economy through cybercrime. There are countries who have allowed organized hacking groups to work from their physical boundaries. There are companies which are paying hacking communities to do this on purpose. And there is also script kiddies who are doing it. So this space is getting crowded now. It is not just, certain hacking groups or communities which is getting organized. The cybercrime space is the third largest economy post US and China, and it is only going to increase further. What is clearly lacking in this country today is penalties and laws. We don't have a data protection law. We don't have any kind of mechanism where companies could be penalized if they get breached. Forget even informing CERT, they don't even want to inform their own employees if they get breached. If something like this happens in the US, they don't not only inform their company employees, but their customers. They also report it to their Security Exchange Commission, and there are new laws coming. But in India, the penalties, so far, if you get breached, are bare minimum. So one of the biggest issues is we need to have stronger regulations. We need to impose penalties and fines, like what EU is doing, the GDPR. We need to have a strong data protection law in place to ensure people take cybersecurity more seriously. That is the key need of the hour. We also need to upskill and train more cybersecurity professionals so we can defend our cyber frontiers.
Oh, all right. You've made some important points too. Of course, people like you and Jiten for a long time have been talking about the need for India to have a data protection law. But clearly, we have a long way to go as far as that is concerned. Let me now bring in Saurabh Sanghvi at this point. Saurabh Sanghvi, you've heard Jiten Jain and Kanish Gaur. They both say that the fact that India has lax laws in this regard is a big part of the problem. There are simply not enough fines and penalties imposed in such cases of cyber attacks. But Kanishk is somewhat critical of Indian businesses and startups in particular. He makes the point that while India's startup ecosystem has exploded over the years, and most of these businesses are tech-based, for them, cybersecurity is simply not a priority. It is something that they are not willing to invest in, and they often end up paying a heavy price for it. Is that something you would agree with? As much as we talk about the need for the government to bring in more stringent laws and for us to have a data protection law and, for there to be stricter fines and penalties, it is also up to individual companies and businesses to secure themselves. And a lot of them have been, in a sense, found wanting on that front. Would you agree?
Yeah. So, Nia, my point is that many of the Indian businesses even don't or are not aware that there is something like cybersecurity which needs to be there, right? What they simply do is that they just start the business, use the free services which are available and don't invest in any of the, you can say, cyber technologies or any other tools which are available. So yes, I agree to the point that yes, Indian businesses are not investing enough. But another thing which I want to point is that there is a very much lack of awareness and lack of training which is there. That if you talk about big entities or big companies, there are proper training materials which are available. The employees are required to go through that. There are regular updations of it as well, and the employees are required to, I mean, again, give the exams, pass those exams as well, and then again further trainings are there. So that kind of thing is not there with the small, or you can say the medium entities which are coming up. Um, Again, I mean, the lack of training is something, lack of awareness is something which I will put at the number one place. And again, the intent to not to invest in cybersecurity is something which I'll put the second. And one more thing, Neha, again, I mean, Jiten did mention that the number looks higher, but I believe that there are many cases where the reporting has not been done, that whether any kind of cyber attack has happened or not. I mean, these small businesses don't believe in reporting anything. If they are attacked, they are fine. They pay the ransomware and then get the things done, and then they don't even report to it as well. So I believe the numbers are much higher than what has been reported in the report.
Wow, that is certainly worrying. You saying, as it is, India has reported more of these attacks than any other country in the world, but you're saying that perhaps the numbers have been underreported. This may only be the tip of the iceberg. Let me go back to Jitin Jain at this point. Jitin, while we are discussing how Indian companies seem to be more vulnerable than most others around the globe, fact of the matter is that the entire world is at much greater risk today as far as cyber attacks and cyber crimes are concerned. According to the same report, in the second quarter of 2023, 1 out of every 44 organizations globally experienced a ransomware attack. That's a 9% jump compared to the same period in 2022. And this report also says that the APAC and Europe regions actually witnessed major year-on-year increase in ransomware attacks per organization, an increase of 29% and 21% respectively. So obviously this is not a problem that is confined to India. Organizations and governments are facing this globally. The question really is whether it is for India or the world, what do you think really is the way ahead, one? And two, how dangerous is the weaponization of artificial intelligence, something that Kanishk referred to, and this report in fact also says, Jitin, that misuse of artificial intelligence by criminals has emerged as a major challenge. They're exploiting advancements in AI technology, particularly in generative AI chat platforms like ChatGPT. Are these platforms making us far more vulnerable? Jitin, please unmute yourself.
Sorry, Neha. Yeah, of course, Kanish is right. Look, you don't need to be a hacker. I mean, forget hacker. You don't even need to be a script reader today to launch a cyber attack or a hacking campaign. You can simply use a generative AI to make it write a special new malware for you. You can use ChatGPT to fudge a malware so that it goes undetected, and you can launch a phishing campaign or a malware attack. See, but that's not the point. The point is, I think sometimes we have to understand that these companies which publish such reports, they end up comparing apple to oranges. You can't compare Europe and US to India, because majority of the hosting service providers, majority of the cloud servers are hosted in US. Domain registrar are based in US and Europe, so they cooperate with law enforcement agencies. So it is a common the understanding among hackers that don't target Europe or Western countries. You might get caught by the law enforcement agencies. So they end up targeting countries like in South Asia and Middle East. Now, they would not target China, not because they are less vulnerable or more vulnerable, because they don't understand the Chinese language. Caught in the middle is India, which is the English-speaking society, where the technological landscape or the cyber landscape is increasing rapidly because of our growing investment in digital public infrastructure. So we are digitally more exposed to the hackers. We are more vulnerable, and we have got less skilled manpower. So in simple words to put, I think Indian cyber landscape is today like a Jurassic Park, where you have got Chinese dinosaurs roaming around, Pakistani dinosaurs roaming around, and government of India is trying to pay someone a forest guard roaming with a gun that if they can hunt some people down. But that does not solve the problem of cyber threats. I think what you need today is a very stringent cyber security law, not only the Data Protection Act or Data Privacy Act. We need a very we need a hello.
We can hear you, Jitin. Go ahead.
So we need a very stringent data privacy law. We need a stringent data security law, and then we need huge investment into creating very highly skilled cybersecurity manpower. And third, we also have to understand that merely running Digital India campaigns and Startup India campaigns will not help our society today. The fruits of Digital India and Startup India campaigns are falling apart. We need to have a very consistent Stay in India policy where our startups which are turning into unicorns, they don't leave India, they stay in India. Our talent, the best of our talents is leaving for the greener pastures, and we need to make them stay in India. Third, we also have to understand that cyber security or cyber attacks sometimes are not only about malwares or hacking campaigns or phishing campaigns. Sometimes they are carried out in the form of information warfare and propaganda to destabilize the economy, target a sector completely, which is what Pakistan is carrying out by defaming our enterprises in the oil sector like Adani's and Ambani's, publishing reports and putting them in a very bad light across different geographies, so that they get into trouble in different geographies because of some orchestrated campaign originating out of Rawalpindi and ISPR. Same is happening with our edtech sector, with our health sector. Beju's unicorn being targeted to show across the globe in poor light. Why? Because India should not become a Vishwaguru. Our startup which are turning into unicorns should not be able to dominate the global platforms. And it is happening when Chinese education industry is being destroyed by the Communist Party. So I think we have to be very careful that our startup sectors is not only a targeted of cyber espionage or hacking campaigns, they're also an equal target of information warfare campaigns. And government need a comprehensive law, not only to detect and punish the orchestrators and perpetrators of these campaigns, but also some sort of mechanism to provide some sort of preventive security to these strategic sectors today.
Interesting. And I liked that analogy you made. That cyberspace today is like Jurassic Park. Sounds scary, but a fascinating analogy indeed. And yes, India definitely faces the huge challenge of this relentless information warfare that's been waged by Pakistan and China, apart from, of course, the battles that our soldiers have to fight on the ground. Let me take this back to Kanishk Gaur. Kanishk, a couple of questions for you. Number one, globally, it has been found that education and research sector is most prone to cyber attacks. And in India, the sectors that have suffered the most cyber attacks are healthcare, again, education and research. When it comes to the government, the military seems to be the most vulnerable, followed by insurance. Why do you think these sectors are most prone to cyber crimes or cyber attacks? And also, what according to you is really the way ahead? I know you talked about the need for more stringent laws, but how do governments deal with this and how do individual companies deal with this?
So we will have to change our perception in terms of what we view as critical infrastructure and what we view as non-critical infrastructure. Earlier, when our healthcare ecosystem was attacked, and we had this attack on All India Institute of Medical Sciences, healthcare was not part of our critical infrastructure. There were no guidelines and regulations that healthcare sector, healthcare companies should do to safeguard themselves. Post this attack, we started including healthcare as a critical infrastructure sector, and companies were mandated to do more to secure themselves. Similarly, some of the other sectors, we have seen that they are not considered as critical. So there are little or no enforcement designed to see what more can be done, or companies start taking cybersecurity more seriously in them. For example, today we have 7 sectors in critical information infrastructure, and most of these sectors have sector-specific guidelines. But if you look at education, there are no guidelines, and you have one of the largest edtech companies based in India. these companies have been hit by ransomware attacks. There is no guideline from government, no best practices, no enforcement mechanisms, what they should be doing if they get hit by a cyber attack, what are basic security controls that they should be deploying. So government will have to look at it in a more holistic manner, not just focus on 5, 6, or 7 sectors. The other thing is that Indians have never really thought that they need to do more to protect their IP. And that's where the Chinese and the Pakistani have taken us for a ride, because whatever IP we develop, we have never developed strong security controls to guard that IP. A lot of times these edtech platforms and even defense tech companies, they don't have good security controls to safeguard their crown jewels. And that is completely lacking, which has hit us really hard today. That's where Jitain pointed, and I am pointing again, that we need to create more security controls, more boundaries, more regulations, and that needs to be looked at more proactively and not reactively today. Because once the incident had happened, you can really do much. You have lost the data, you have lost the opportunity. I've seen large defense contracting companies globally investing billions of dollars in cybersecurity. But how much of money do our defense tech companies invest for protecting, the crown jewels? That's something which is clearly lacking in this country. We talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, we talk about Make in India, we talk about strategic alliances in defense, we talk about defense tech companies coming to India and working with Indian partners. But whatever IP they are creating, what they are doing to protect those IP, that's something which is the need of the hour.
All right, that is again very comprehensively explained. The point is that really governments as well as organizations need to wake up from their slumber, and they need to urgently take these measures, and that can only begin once we start taking these threats seriously. Saurabh Sanghvi is somebody who represents corporate India in a sense. Do you I beg your pardon. Do you agree with what Kanishk and Jitain are saying, and what according to you is the way ahead? How can we, companies like yours for example, secure themselves against these kind of cyber attacks?
Right. Yeah, definitely I agree with both of them. What I expect from the government is that, and when I say that I'm expecting a government, I'm asking government to lead me, right? To provide me a guidance as to how I can protect. See, as a small entity or say medium entity, I do not have those kind of resources to understand the implications of each of these attacks, how these attacks are going to be happen, what I need to do to prevent it, right? So, like for example, if there is a tax related issue, or say there is some other kind of regulatory issue, the government has been putting a lot of pressure on us to pay all the taxes and other things. At the same time, I look up to the government, right, to provide a guidance on us as to how we can stop all these attacks, because many of us don't have that kind of resources to stop at our individual level. But at the same time, as I mentioned earlier as well, there is definitely a need of spending money on this aspect, right? We need to take this more seriously. Again, I mean, this approach of casualness is no longer valid. With Chat GPT and other things are coming up, I don't know where it will take to us, but definitely it requires that we need to spend more on our cybersecurity laws, create awareness about our employees, right, and also ensure that again, I mean, we do whatever is possible within our resources to stop all these attacks.
Well, as I said earlier, we certainly need to do more as a country. Our government needs to do a lot more, and then individual entities, businesses, startups in particular need to also wake up and smell the coffee. They need to realize that cyber security threats are real. Well, on that note, Jitain Jain, Kanishk Gaur, Saurabh Sanghvi, thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us your perspective on this big story. All right, that's all the time we have on this segment of Global Lens. It's time for us to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. There's much more coming up on the other side.
With all this gear, you must be wondering if I'm climbing a mountain. Well, let me give you a wider look of this place. This is Asia's largest mountain of shame.
A mountain of waste, almost the height of the Qutub Minar.
When you enter capital cities of some of the biggest countries in the world, you don't have 3 garbage mountains waiting to welcome you, depending on whichever side of the city you enter from.